Hello and welcome to Soul Steps. I'm David Gallagher. I'm enjoying a beautiful fall day down at the Oregon coast. Several years ago, Harry Styles became the first male to ever appear on the cover of Vogue magazine by himself. And in that cover shot, he wore a woman's dress and some women's attire and accessories. And in his interview with Vogue, he said, "What's really exciting is that all of these lines are just kind of crumbling away. When you take away, there's clothes for men and there's clothes for women. Once you remove any barriers, obviously you open up the arena in which you can play." And the quote from Styles on that cover said, "Anytime you're putting up a barrier in your life, you're limiting yourself." Well, as a follower of Christ, I know that God has given us His Word, the Bible, and that His Word is full of do's and don'ts. And yet we don't like to think about that anymore. And actually throughout history, men and women have not wanted to live with boundaries. And yet God knew when He established those guardrails, I call them, He knew that by establishing those guardrails, if a man and if a woman stay in the boundaries, the framework of those guardrails, that he and she will live a happy, fulfilled, healthy life. And that when you stray beyond those guardrails, that often there can be danger and there can be destruction. You know, we don't want to talk about this anymore, but in Deuteronomy 22 it just says, "A woman shall not wear anything that pertains to a man, nor shall a man put on a woman's garment, for all who do so are an abomination to the Lord your God." Tough words in our culture today and in our world, yeah, really tough words. No one wants to think that they're an abomination to God. And in fact, today, many people will say that the Old Covenant, the Old Testament, where that was written, has been tossed away. It's been thrown out because we're under a new covenant of grace. Well, it's a big misunderstanding to think that just because we're in a new covenant of God's grace, where there's forgiveness of sin when you call on Jesus, it doesn't mean that God has done away with the guardrails for life that He laid out in the Old Testament. Those still stand. It's just that under the new covenant, when we do fail, we're not having to offer sacrifices for our sin because Jesus paid for it all once when He died on the cross. You know, there's an intentional effort being made in our world and in our society to deconstruct the idea of traditional masculinity. The New York Times calls it toxic masculinity and says that it's led to harmful environments. The article in the New York Times claimed that toxic masculinity is what can come when you teach boys that they can't express emotion openly, that they have to be tough all the time, that anything other than that makes them feminine or weak. Well, I agree wholeheartedly that boys shouldn't be taught that they can't express emotion openly, that they shouldn't be taught that they have to be tough all the time, and that anything other than that makes them feminine or weak. So I agree with that. But when it comes to the place that we blur the lines of gender and sexuality in an attempt to get rid of the healthy things in masculinity, that's where it all spins terribly wrong. The blurring of lines between male and female is not new and it's not revolutionary. It's been going on from the beginning of time. And it's an attempt to stray from God's order for gender and sexuality by breaking down any guideline or guardrail set in place. And in our culture and our society today, sexual ambiguity and gender ambiguity is not brave, and it's not courageous. It is this, though. It's an indulgence in missing God's mark for the best. It is sin. The biblical man is expected to be clearly masculine and not questionably masculine or clearly feminine. And it doesn't mean that you have to chop wood and drink black coffee in order to be a man, but it does mean that whatever you wear and whatever you do, no one should doubt or wonder about your gender or your sexuality. God wants biblically grounded men and biblically grounded women. And whatever sex you are, whatever gender you are, here's the thing. God wants us all to so live by His Spirit and have His Spirit living in us through Jesus that we demonstrate His character and the qualities of His Spirit, which are love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, self-control. All the fruits of God's Spirit outlined in Galatians 5:22 and 23. Those are the things that should be common threads between men and women. And that when those characteristics and qualities are being exuded in the life of a man or a woman, guess what? We all get along. And we respect and honor each other's gender. Ephesians 5:1 and 2 says, "Follow God's example as dearly loved children, and walk in the way of love, just as Christ loved us and gave Himself up for us." According to the Bible and Christ's example in it, masculinity is this: it's humble leadership. It is sacrificial love and meekness. And we need, once again, masculinity that will treat women with honor, prize honesty, and fight for the sake of the vulnerable. Thanks for watching today. If you'd like to reach out to us, you can write us at hello@soulsteps.org. We'd love to hear from you. And thanks for your support. We appreciate it. God bless.